We're starting this new section now, and during this section, we're going to start building our site. Of course, we're not going to be able to build it all within this one section, but at least that's what we're going to do, in that we are going to start our site. And in actual fact, in this tutorial, I'm going to do something that I suggest you do too, prior to even opening up Dreamweaver. And that is to think about what you want your site to be. Initially, you might be thinking, well, I want it to be a website. What do you mean? What do I want it to be? Well, I'm trying to get you to be a little bit more specific, and if I talk you through the process that I often go through when I'm building a site, whether it's for myself or whether it's for a client, if I talk you through this process, then at least you get an idea of one way of working. I'm not saying it's the only way, but it is one way. My initial thoughts will be, who exactly is the audience for this particular website that I'm about to build? At the most basic level, is the site for an adult or is it for a child? And once you start to think about considerations like this, then you'll realise that the way you build your site, and certainly the way it looks, will have a clear bearing on your direction. If you think about the site that we are about to build during this course, well, if this was for an adult, then of course it's going to look similar to the site that we've glanced at in the last section, where we're focusing on a particular village here in the UK. However, if it was for a child, then certainly in terms of the visuals, I would make it much more vibrant in terms of colours. And also, if we think about the content, then if it was for a child, perhaps to be used as an educational tool in school, then of course the content in terms of the language will have to be that much more basic. And therefore, as we now see, planning our site prior to opening up Dreamweaver actually helps us out in the long run. Now, my method of working usually revolves around 4 separate sections. I'll start off by deciding what I want to achieve with our website. And in my case for this Stockton Heath site, I'm going to create a site that provides relevant information to an audience that wants to know about the village. Additionally, I would also consider, do I want to make the site up to date in terms of, will the textual content relate to what the village is like today, or is it more of a historic site in terms of it's an educational tool or an educational site whereby people can look at it and research all about the past? Now, to be quite honest with this particular site, I will probably have a blend of the two. On the initial index page, our landing page, I will focus on what the village is like today, but also by using the navigation, I want to be able to provide a different page, or pages, that relate to the village's history. And therefore, once I have decided all this, my next step, based on what I have decided the site will be about and who it's for, it's only at this point I'll start to design it. And designing it for me normally means I initially do this on paper. And I do this because I do know in the long run it will save me some time, because without considering what pages to include prior to building the site, and let me remind you of the example I've just spoken about in terms of my first page will be an up-to-date page of the village, whereas other pages reached by the navigation will be history pages. Well, by considering what pages to include, it means I avoid having to constantly chop and change various different pages further down the line. Now, I know it seems a good idea to launch straight in by using Dreamweaver, but trust me, in the long run, you will be saving yourself a lot of time by planning it out in advance on paper. And this stage in my process is known as wireframing, in that I will draw out, or I'll sketch out, a framework that I want my content to fit within. Of course, this wireframe sketch doesn't have to be pixel perfect, but by doing this, it does allow me to see a visual representation of my final structure and where things are going to be placed. And during this stage of planning out the site, whilst I am wireframing, I'll decide which images to use and balanced out with the textual content. And this is something we also need to consider if we want our finished site to be found easily when somebody is searching for it when using whatever search engine that they prefer. At this stage, you might be thinking that the actual textual content couldn't be further from your mind at the moment. Well, it is worth thinking about what you want to say, certainly towards the top of your first page, because any words or phrases that you use and how you convert these into headings or titles, well, whatever phrases or words you do use really do need to be phrases or words that you think your users will be searching for when they use a search engine like Google. For example, if your main title running across the top of the page said something like, "Hello and welcome to our site," and you make this an H1 title, then really you're not doing yourself all that many favours in terms of SEO, search engine optimization. because it's very unlikely that people searching for your site or similar sites will use that phrase. Maybe a better title across the top would be Welcome to Stockton Heath, the shopping village, because that way you are using the name of the village, and within that opening sentence you are using other words or phrases, i.e. village or shopping, that people searching for your site will likely use. Anyway, we'll get back to that sort of thing later. And then moving forward with my next step, it's only now that I'll start to design it within Dreamweaver. I will use my wireframe and then start converting that into some form of template, which I would then save as my opening page. Therefore, once I have finished designing it and building it, I would need to thoroughly test it. And I can't stress this enough. Maybe after a few weeks of building a site, perhaps I'm not the best judge of what it really is like. I will have become too close to it, and perhaps I won't be able to see any glaringly obvious errors. So it's at the testing stage that I start to show the site either to friends or to colleagues, so that they can not only check it out, but also test it. It's better that they find a dead link or a link that doesn't navigate to the page that you hoped it would do. It's better that they find that problem and report back to me, rather than making the site live with these mistakes. And let me warn you, it's at this stage you really do need to have a thick skin. You'll have spent some time working on your masterpiece, and then once you start getting feedback on it, it's often difficult to accept that what I thought was a perfect part of the site is actually not that useful. And therefore I have to remember, who is the site for? Is it for me, or is it for the user? Well, of course the answer is every time it's for the user, and therefore you just have to take it on the chin and make any modifications required. Right then, I'm going to finish up this tutorial then, now that I've talked through the process that I frequently go through, as I say, when I'm designing a site for myself or for a client.